Since getting out of your head and out of your thoughts for a little while and into your senses is a healthy thing to do from time to time, what are some of the ways that you can do that? What are some of the ways that you can so absorb yourself fully in the present moment sensory experience that you're not, for the time being, ruminating over what has happened or is happening or might happen in the future? Well, there are five senses, so let's just go through them. First, the visual sense mode. Anything that will allow you to really lose yourself in visual experience and not be processing the thoughts about it will do the trick. Um, right now, for example, I happen to be working on a jigsaw puzzle with my teenage daughter. And I find myself just scanning all these pieces for shapes and colors and patterns and so forth. And I'm really fully in the visual experience. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow at the same time. Some people, I hear it's a craze, get into various coloring books or making mandalas and so forth. And these are marketed as sort of mindfulness tools. I encourage you to find your own. It may be walking through nature, especially in extreme situations, maybe a snowstorm or a rainstorm, where your visual information simply becomes a field of phenomena. This is what's arising, colors and patterns and textures, and you're not necessarily interpreting them and making sense out of them and analyzing them. That's what the thinking mind does. Anything that will allow you to lose yourself, or actually, that's not the right term. It's more like fully engage your consciousness, your awareness into the visual field, will take you out of your thinking mind and into the present moment in a very direct and immediate way. Sound. Some people like to listen to music in a very mindful way. This isn't a matter of, putting the radio on in the background to whatever you're doing. A lot of people do that a lot of the time. But I'm talking more of a situation where you might sit down and, put headphones on and sit in a darkened room or close your eyes and just really listen intently to what's happening. What you're doing really is your consciousness is just following along with the auditory sensations as they're happening. And especially if you get some, very sublime music played by some very skilled professional and you really focus on the details, that's a way of sort of entering your senses fully, the sense of sound. One of the mindfulness practices for the nose and tongue, which is very popular, is mindful eating. You may have heard of the famous raisin demonstration of people first being introduced to mindfulness are given a raisin and they're encouraged to really examine it with all of their senses. But when it comes to smelling it very carefully and tasting it and so forth, one really takes one's time when eating to fully engage the senses of smell and of taste. When people go on meditation retreats, they eat all their meals in silence. And it looks like they're eating in very slow motion because they're chewing very slowly and they're savoring every little sensation that's coming directly from the tongue or from the nose. And of course, most mindfulness practices have to do with mindfulness of the body. Breathing exercises, walking exercises, and we'll go into those in a moment. The idea is simply to feel the sensations, the micro sensations that are bursting in your body at all times. There's a whole avalanche of potential sensations that normally we block out, because we're thinking of something. We're not really engaged with the sensations of the body. And that's what mindfulness practice of the body really encourages us to do. To feel every little sensation when breathing, for example, or when walking, or when sitting. If you're sitting quietly with your back straight and you feel a pain in the knee, for example, or your back starts aching, this isn't something to be resented and fled from, but it's really an invitation to explore, to investigate deeply, experientially, immediately, viscerally. What exactly does it feel like, that pain in the knee or that sore back? And we notice when we pay full attention without immediately creating a story about it. Oh, my knee is hurt. I'm going to have to go to the doctor. I wonder if it's that old, sports injury or whatever. Instead of that kind of mental proliferation that takes off from first feeling the sensation, instead of that, one stays with the sensation and feels it ever more carefully, more subtly. One stays with it and investigates. Is the sensation, sharp or dull or pulsing or steady, or does it feel hot or cold? The more detail that you look for in bodily experience, the more detail you will find. And that's really what mindfulness of the body is trying to do. But really, at all five modalities, the idea is very simple. There are six modes of consciousness. There are six channels to human experience: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. And when we find ourselves sort of stuck on channel six over and over and over again, mindfulness practice is a deliberate way of changing the channel, of moving away from the thinking sphere and entering much more fully than we're used to doing in everyday life into the sensory experience that comes up. That's why mindfulness practice is largely a deliberate practice. One sits down to pay attention to the sensations of the body. One closes one's eyes to pay attention to the nuances of the sound that you're listening to. And one eats slowly when doing mindful eating, so as to allow time for the nuanced investigation of flavor and odor and so forth. So I encourage you to find your own way to do this. Anything is up for grabs as long as it's healthy and legal and respectful. And just take a break from constantly building up in your mind a model of what's going on out there in the outer world, and instead spend some time looking very closely and simply observing, without interference, without elaboration or interpretation, what's happening in the inner world, what's happening in your own mind and body as you bring awareness to the information coming through the sense doors. I think you'll find it's a great healing practice to do.